So when he was on that Turkey show, Daniel made the comment that this case was turning into a bit of a circus. The irony, of course, being that he is the ringleader. So if you followed this case from the beginning, you know exactly what I'm talking about. After Malaya cleared out and went completely silent, Daniel started pushing the narrative that basically he's the only one who's speaking out for these children. Look at Malaya. She must be guilty because she left. People bought that hook, line and sinker. And probably for the first 2 months, anytime I did a video where I was pointing out the inconsistencies in Daniel's statements, the outright lies, the contradictions, people would come at me with, look at Daniel. He's the only one speaking for these children. He can't be guilty. Look at Malaya. She left. And, despite seeing signs of abuse and neglect in the photos of the children, despite things that were said by Malaya and Daniel making me think there is some serious coercive control, possibly even DV going on here, I was reluctant to really talk about that because there wasn't anything substantial other than bruises, etc. on Jack, and not so clean clothes, Lily looking a little bit underweight for her age. But gradually, more and more people started to see beyond the facade and realise that Daniel wasn't this hero that he wanted people to think he was. So all of a sudden, we have Durwood O'Grady, aka Darren Geddes, step up to the mark with a new narrative still aimed at Malaya. So this is when we get the whole ridiculous story, which I think if you look at it, Dingbat gave about 20 different versions of it, basically claiming that Malaya had someone pick up the children from the end of the driveway and that she's got them hidden on the reserve. It didn't take people very long to figure out that, for starters, Dingbat was a shocking liar, but also that he was actually quite close to Daniel and his family and was basically acting as their spin doctor. Now, had it just been that, I think we would have forgotten about Dingbat by now. But the problem is, Joni and Daniel decided they liked Dingbat's story, but rather than just adopt his outright lies, they just tweaked their narratives so that they were basically pushing people in that direction. So all of a sudden, the Malaya having her children taken away and hidden for her narrative started gaining traction, even though it is the most ridiculous story on the planet. So, of course, myself and many other content creators jumped to the challenge to basically show why it was a complete fabrication. But of course, while Janie just went silent, Daniel just kept tweaking that story until the documents came out. And then all of a sudden, we get the push for, see, look, Daniel's innocent because he passed the polygraph exam. Again, many of us worked hard to try and educate people with regards to, first of all, the efficiency of polygraphs, the accuracy of polygraphs, but not only that, pointing out that there's redactions in the document where it talks about the polygraph exams, and it doesn't say outright that Daniel or Malaya passed their polygraph exam. It says that about Wade, it says that about Cody, but when it comes to Daniel and Malaya, it says that they were truthful when it came to these things, but they were all redacted. So it's just been one thing after the next. Something comes out that shows Daniel in a bad light, and he suddenly starts gaslighting people. So we hear about the neighbours who gave the account of the car. So what does Daniel do? He starts gaslighting Brad Wong. And we even momentarily get someone attempting to gaslight Justin Smith, except that people had done their research and realised that he was actually a good guy. But it seems like Daniel's number one go-to, anytime people start to basically shine a light on the real Daniel, he goes back to trying to gaslight Malaya and make her look bad. It may seem like Daniel's suddenly gone quiet, but when you actually have a look, there's a lot of fake accounts that sound very similar to the various players in this. Your Logans, your Durwoods, your Daniels. And these fake accounts are still pushing very hard to convince people to look at Malaya, to convince people that Malaya is the villain, Daniel is innocent. So the purpose of this video is just to remind people one simple fact. Either they are both innocent or they are both guilty. And how do we know this? Because of their narratives at the very start. So here's the thing, we all experience the world differently based on our own preconceived ideas, based on our own life experience. So two people are going to give different accounts of one event. Not only that, but if you question someone about an event and then you re-question them, their narrative is not going to be verbatim. There will be subtle variations in how they tell the same story. It will be the same story, but the way they tell it will be different. This was not the case with Daniel and Malaya. So what I'm going to focus on in this video is their account of Friday morning prior to calling 911. Because while the rest of their script is full of inconsistencies, outright lies, and contradictions, the thing that stands out with this Friday morning script is that clearly this is the script that they prepared prior to calling 911. My thoughts are they thought that they were going to call 911, say, this is what happened this morning, the children are missing, and that would be all they had to give. It appears that they didn't actually realise that they would also be questioned about the days leading up to the disappearance, and therefore didn't think to try and come up with a script for Thursday afternoon and Thursday evening. Which of course is why none of them, including Janie, feature in each other's scripts, aside from Daniel holding a fence pole for Janie. And of course none of their timelines for Thursday afternoon or Thursday evening match up either. So that to me says they didn't prepare that script prior to calling 911. They thought all they would have to do would be to describe Friday morning, and therefore they prepared a script for Friday morning, didn't prepare anything else. This is the reason why I want to look at this particular block of time that they describe, because this shows us that they collaborated on their scripts. The good news here, of course, is that Janie doesn't come into this till Act 2. So there's no Janie in this. Just Daniel and Malaya. So let's jump in.
What happened was we woke up, I heard them playing in the next room beside us, and I was drifting in and out of sleep, and they're not the type of kids that we tell them not to go outside on their own. We always make sure that we're out there with them watching them, and they happen to just get out that sliding door, and we can't hear it when it opens. And they were outside playing, but we weren't aware of it at the time. And the next thing we knew, it was quiet, and we get up, and I tell him, my partner, Daniel, I tell him, "Do you hear the kids?" And he says, "No." And we get up instantly. We're looking outside. We're looking everywhere, yelling for them. And I instantly just call 911.
Now, I did do a full analysis of Malay's interview, and I will link it at the end of this video. But a few things that stand out here that show us that this is scripted. First of all, we get a lot of we statements that shouldn't be we statements. We woke up. She makes it sound like they simultaneously woke up. And then she switches to, "I heard them playing in the next room beside us." Note how she over-explains the next room beside us. Instead of just saying, "I heard them playing in their bedroom," and then maybe clarifying which is next to ours, she had to emphasise the fact that they were in the next room beside us. So just the fact that she's not using natural speech there is also a bit of a giveaway that it's not natural speech. This is scripted. She has a story to tell. This is one of the points she needs to make. Then she's saying that she was drifting in and out of sleep. I was drifting in and out of sleep. And she does they happened to get out the sliding door and were outside playing. She's presenting these as factual, even though she's just told us that she was drifting in and out of sleep. So she should be saying, "We think they must have got out that door and been playing outside." The fact that this is presented as factual rather than a hypothesis is a red flag. It suggests that it is scripted. And then we get the next thing we knew, and she started saying the room was quiet. She forgot the script. So she corrects herself with, "It was quiet." And then again, we get the we statements. We get up. But again, this is not a linear narrative. We get up, I tell him, my partner, Daniel, I tell him, "Do you hear the kids?" He says no, and we get up instantly. So they get up twice. She forgot that that first part of what she was saying was having them getting up. And then she has the story of, "Do you hear the kids?" And then they get up. So, clear sign this is made up. Not only that, but the way she is describing the speech it is more like a prepared narrative. Because she didn't tell him this. If this actually happened, it would have been, "I asked him if he heard the kids." But instead, she turns it into a narrative. I tell him, quote, "Do you hear the kids?" So you have the signs that it is a pre-planned speech. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to say, "I told you this," and that comes out wrong. I tell him, "Do you hear the kids?" Huge red flag. You get the we statements, which indicate a narrative that's been created by two people together. Okay, so let's say we woke up, we couldn't hear them, we drifted in and out of sleep, maybe we did hear them first. That's what would have happened here. So essentially you have a non-linear narrative, you have the wrong use of pronouns, you have the wrong use of words in terms of I tell him instead of I asked him. And you have that sentence that is what you should have in written speech, not in verbal speech. I tell him, do you hear the kids? So Malaya only spoke once, but she thoroughly screwed it up from the beginning. So now let's move on to Daniel.
Yeah, Lily came into the room multiple times. I mean, me and Malaya and the baby were just in the bedroom. And Lily came in multiple times, so I seen her that morning. And Jack was out playing in the kitchen, I'm guessing, and they slid open the back sliding door. It's almost like silent.
So this was Daniel's first public retelling of the story. And he kind of got it, except that he introduces this idea of Lily coming in multiple times, and he's saying that him and Malaya and the baby were in the bedroom. He doesn't establish here anything about them being asleep or anything. They were just in the bedroom. So you could imagine here that it's a case of they're just chilling out in the bedroom with the baby. Lily pops her head in a few times, and Jack is playing in the kitchen. So he's placed Jack in a different part of the house. Lily and Jack aren't playing with each other. Lily's pestering Daniel, sticking her head in multiple times for some reason, while Jack is busy playing in the kitchen. Now you could say that the rest of their stories match here, because he also presents this notion of they slid open that back door and went outside, and it's almost silent. Now here's the thing, if Daniel had just given this one interview, then you could have listened to them and gone, well, Malaya's sounds a little bit off, but Daniel's seems to match with hers mostly. It's not like they've told identical stories, so maybe this is truthful. We'll look at Malaya's red flags and think there's something being left out here. But with Malaya heading for the hills, people might just decide, well, okay, maybe she was just anxious about doing this interview. Maybe she was just not in the right frame of mind because her children were missing. People would find ways to excuse it, potentially. But one thing we've learned about Daniel is that he just doesn't know when to stay silent. Now, before I move on to Daniel's next statement, like his next interview, I do want to play the next part of what he said about this particular morning when he talks about jumping in the car. Because when you add this to the red flags of him giving a different account of what the children were doing, then you start to get the red flags adding up, and you start to question why their stories aren't quite matching. But at the same time, it's also when we start to see things being a little bit too similar.
As soon as I seen that they were gone, I immediately jumped in the car, did all the dirt roads, did all the culverts.
Now, in Malaya's version, she's drifting in and out of sleep, and then she suddenly realises it's quiet. And she says to Daniel, do you hear them? Or she tells Daniel, do you hear them? In this version, Daniel doesn't mention anything about drifting in and out of sleep. But not only that, he makes himself the star of the story here. As soon as I saw that they were gone, he didn't suddenly hear the silence, he suddenly saw they were gone. And he's forgotten that Malaya is actually meant to be a part of this as well. So at this retelling, we don't have him suddenly waking up or suddenly being woken up by Malaya saying, do you hear the kids? Not only that, Malaya just kind of evaporates in his story, and he's the one who makes the discovery that they're gone. He doesn't hear silence, he sees that they're gone. Now, there is one thing that is consistent between Malaya and Daniel here, but is one thing that actually makes it look more like a narrative. And that's their overuse of these connecting words to show time. This is a narrative strategy, saying, I instantly got out of bed. I immediately jumped in the car. In natural speech, they tend to become somewhat redundant because when you get out of bed, yes, you instantly get out of bed. Unless you're like, well, I crawled out of bed. When you say, as soon as I saw they were gone, as soon as is the same as saying immediately. As soon as I saw they were gone, I immediately. So it's overdoing it. It's adding these time connectors to illustrate the story, basically. They're words that aren't necessary. They're additional. You would get them in a written narrative, not in natural speech. And the fact that you've got both of them inserting what is essentially the same word into their narrative is a huge red flag. But of course, you know, Daniel is the gift that keeps on giving. So we're not done yet.
As soon as I saw the scene they were missing, I jumped right in the vehicle and I did every dirt road and searched every culvert. And as soon as I noticed they weren't there, I immediately jumped right in the vehicle and surveyed all the area, every dirt road, every culvert they could find.
He actually repeated that multiple times, including when he was speaking to Belinda. Belinda said for her it was a huge red flag to hear him say exactly what he'd said to the media. Because you don't say things verbatim 4 times over in different interviews. And while this doesn't directly tie in with the earlier narrative that him and Malaya gave, you still have the same thing happening here with the unnecessary words. Again, we got he immediately jumped in the vehicle. He didn't use it every time, but he did use it, but he also repeated himself 3 times over, pretty much, I think it was, with the same story verbatim.
And he says he and the children's mother, Malaya Brooks Murray, were in bed with their other child, a baby, and they were sort of dozing in and out of sleep. And Lily and Jack were playing in the kitchen, but Lily came into the bedroom multiple times and woke him up. And here's what he says happened next.
And then about 20 minutes passed, and then when I woke up, Malaya was right beside me. She was still asleep. And I said, I don't hear Lily and Jack. So I jumped straight up out of bed. Silence is never a good thing when you have kids, because you know they're getting into something. And then we noticed the boots were gone. We went outside, made our way into the backyard. We didn't see them anywhere.
So first of all, it seems that Daniel misplaced his copy of the script, tried to do it from memory, and took Malaya's role instead of his own. Or I guess you could say in some instances, he merged the roles. So he has them both drifting in and out of sleep, and I'll come back to that. And he's the one that points out that you can't hear Lily and Jack. And of course, he goes on to point out that their boots are gone. So, you know, let's establish they're outside. But let's have a look at everything he has said here. First of all, he's saying that the pair of them are dozing in and out of sleep. Well, how does he know that Malaya was also dozing in and out of sleep? Did she tell him that? Or was it just that their sleep is so synchronised that they wake up and they look at each other and go, hello, and then fall asleep again? Because given that once they were awake and allegedly discovered the children were missing, the fact of them dozing in and out of sleep is not going to be a topic of conversation between them. Especially given that, according to Daniel, he basically hit the ground running and didn't stop for the rest of the day. So when would he and Malaya have had time to sit down over a cup of tea and go, yeah, you know, I was drifting in and out of sleep this morning, listening to the children who were in the bedroom or in the kitchen, or one of them was in the kitchen. But he's claiming on one hand that he's drifting in and out of sleep, or dozing in and out of sleep in his words. But then he's said that Lily came in and woke him up multiple times. So that's a bit different from dozing in and out of sleep. That's being woken up multiple times. And then apparently, even though he was dozing or not awake, being woken up multiple times, he knew that 20 minutes had passed. And we get the over-explaining. Malaya was right beside me. Well, where else would she be? Sleeping on the floor? You've just established that you and Malaya were in bed, dozing in and out of sleep. He's added unnecessary detail here. But it seems that because he's adopted Malaya's script, he's got the details wrong. So he's saying here Malaya was still asleep. And then he says, I said, I don't hear Lily and Jack. Now, he's not saying here, I woke Malaya up, or I realised I couldn't hear them, so I woke Malaya up. He's just like, I said this. Just out into the ether. Hoping that maybe Malaya will wake up and that she'll be fully conscious and will have heard every word I said. It's not linear. Given that he's established that Malaya was still asleep, then you should have him saying he realised that he couldn't hear them. Because if Malaya's still asleep, he's not just going to be blurting it out. Especially not given, as he points out, when kids are quiet usually means they're into something. So why are you going to wake up and automatically assume that you need to panic because you don't hear them? When you've just established, well, you know, if we don't hear them, it means they're into something. But then it's a dead giveaway what he says next. Like I said, when you have a scripted narrative, something that two people have worked on together, because they have basically decided the narrative together, and because it's not them retelling something that they have experienced, you get a lot of we statements. Now, he has established here that Malaya is still asleep. He doesn't necessarily establish if she's woken up when he apparently said, I don't hear Lily and Jack. He then says that I jumped straight out of bed. Again, we have the unnecessary addition of straight out of bed. If you jump out of bed, well, yeah, you're jumping straight out of bed. So he's adding in these unnecessary words. But then after he said that he jumped out of bed, he then goes to, we noticed the boots were gone. We went outside. We didn't see them anywhere. Either he is suddenly adopting the royal we for himself, or he's forgotten that he's left Malaya out of this part of the narrative and that he should therefore not be using we statements. Because based on what he said, Malaya is still asleep. Okay, so let's move on.
And you guys mentioned that you guys could hear them throughout the morning. Is that correct?
Yes, I actually did hear. I know when it says in the documents that we heard them in the next room over, like in their bedroom. I didn't hear them in their bedroom. I heard when Lily would pop in, I heard Jack in the kitchen.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I heard him rustling around in the kitchen, right? And But then when me and Malaya made our way out to the kitchen, there was nothing moved. The chairs were still perfectly in place. There was no chairs pulled up against the counter for them to, they usually would jump up and take food if they wanted, because kids always do that, right? They would go into the fridge. They would go into the other pantry and grab food if they wanted. Like, they had unlimited food if they wanted to grab it. And, they would go into the fridge, take yogurt cups and eat them, or cereal or whatever. So, but nothing was moved, Daniel. Nothing was moved.
So he's signalling here that he's read the documents. And what he's trying to do here is make it sound like, oh, the RCMP got the details wrong in the documents. And this is what the truth is. But the thing is, no innocent parent who has had no involvement in their child going missing has ever, in the history of mankind, had to turn around and say, actually, the documents are wrong, and this is my story. I mean, let's start with the fact that the information in the documents comes directly from this Corporal Curl listening to the audio of the interviews done with Daniel and Malaya. So it is essentially a record of interview. Even though she wasn't there, she's listened to the audio. She's probably also looked at the record of interviews, the reports written by the staff that did the interviews. But if you were being truthful, if you had a story that had not changed from day one, then you wouldn't start by saying, well, I know this is what it says in the documents, but this is going beyond being defensive. This is also just providing complete unnecessary information. You're not going to worry about what the documents say. If you are giving an interview, you're just going to tell it as it happened. Of course, the irony here is that there's multiple versions in the documents anyway. And one of the versions given by him was that he heard Jack in the kitchen. So he doesn't even know what he's talking about here. But what he's doing in this retelling is that he's saying that when Lily popped her head in, he would hear Jack in the kitchen. So what he's implying here is that Lily must have been opening the door. While the door was open, he could hear Jack in the kitchen, and then she was closing the door and he wouldn't hear Jack again. Well, this is very problematic for his whole narrative. Because if that's the case, if you could only hear him in the kitchen when the door's open because Lily's opened the door to pop her head in, then why is it that when you woke up again, that you were like, oh, I can't hear them? Because you've just established here that you were only hearing Jack in the kitchen when Lily was opening the door. Clearly he's over-defensive, though, about what's in the documents, because he has to really sell the kitchen story, and he's overselling that story. This is unnecessary information. He's just really, really overselling it. Why does it matter if there's a chair has been moved or hasn't been moved? That's not important to the narrative. But he suddenly thinks it is, because he needs to convince people that Jack had to have been in the kitchen. And in his mind, his way of convincing people that Jack had to have been in the kitchen is by saying, I could hear him in the kitchen, but you know what? I couldn't see anything moved. Like, that suddenly gives validity to his statement of hearing Jack in the kitchen. It doesn't. It's just over-explaining. This is a classic example of the way Daniel tries to adapt to fit in with what people are questioning. And this time it falls flat on its face because he is over-explaining and making it sound less genuine.
And now they're being loud-ish. I mean, loud enough for you guys to hear them.
Yeah.
Your other daughter, Meadow, she was there though, right?
Yeah, she was actually laying beside me with Malaya.
Did you guys ever, or did Malaya ever tell the kids to be quiet? Were they ever waking up Meadow at any point with their noise?
In that morning, no. But when Lily poked in, I did go, shh. Like when, she would come in the room because she always woke up Meadow. Same with Jack, but I mean, that's what kids do too, right?
Now, one thing I've noticed is the moment you bring Malaya into the equation, Daniel does one of two things. Either he says something that is intended to gaslight her, or he forgets that he's not supposed to say something, and he throws it in as a way of gaslighting her. I'll explain that second one first because that doesn't really apply here and you're probably thinking, what are you talking about? But when it comes to talking about handing over their phones, Daniel had been saying, I did the right thing, I offered my phone, I offered to take a rug test. And then you get an instance where he is trying to throw shade on Malaya. And in order to make her look bad, he says something to the extent of that RCMP had confiscated both their phones. So he contradicted his original story of him willingly handing it over because he forgot that in the moment and he was trying to make Malaya look bad and it came out the wrong way, that implicated him as well. But what he's done here, this turkey guy has made the assumption that since Lily and Jack are Malaya's children, that she would be the one to tell them to be quiet. He's also made the assumption that they were being loud, which is not what Daniel actually said. He said that Lily would poke her head in. When she poked her head in, he could hear Jack in the kitchen. So essentially, it doesn't sound like they were being excessively loud. Or at least, not in Daniel's version of the story. In Malaya's version of the story, yes, because they're in the other room laughing. But Daniel's forgot that that's actually not his version of the story. All he's taken on board here is that the turkey guy has said to him, did Malaya ask them to be quiet? We know that Daniel goes out of his way to gaslight Malaya and make her look like a bad parent. So what does he do? He introduces him telling Lily to shush. This is a new addition to the narrative. And because it is a new addition to the narrative, he decides he has to sell that story. And now he adds in that Lily is always waking up Meadow. He's taken the suggestion by this turkey guy that it must be disruptive when Lily is poking her head in the room, and he's run with it, even though he has just established earlier that he could hear Jack rustling in the kitchen. That's not loud or disruptive. And Lily poking her head in, there was nothing there that he said about her being loud. But of course, he has to gaslight Malaya. He has to appear to be the good parent here, so he has to introduce to the story that he shushed Lily. Otherwise, he wouldn't be the good parent here. So he had no choice but to add this to the narrative.
Now, so you wake up because there's been some time that you guys hadn't heard the kids anymore, correct?
I woke up when Malaya woke me up. I'm pretty sure it was her who woke me up because we both kind of like woke up at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I remember her saying, as it says in the documents, she said, I don't hear them. But the craziest thing was when I woke up, it was in the first 5 seconds that she said, I don't hear them.
Okay.
And usually you would have to wait a couple you know what I mean? Or like 30 seconds or something like that, because it could be in the fridge, because that's usually what everything goes quiet when they're, grabbing food or doing something, right?
Yeah. And so she wakes you up. Would you have noticed?
Well, I think she woke me up, right? We kind of woke up at the same time, but I really don't know.
Someone needs to explain to Daniel that this saying of you need to have a good memory to be a good liar does not mean that when documents are released, you then go and read those documents and adopt the story that's in those documents and forget about what you said before, because it still applies. What he's done here is he's going, oh, well, this is what it says in the documents, and he's contradicting what he's said earlier. So he's saying here that he woke up when Malaya woke him up. But then he says he's not quite sure, no, they might have woken up at the same time. And she said, I don't hear them. Well, the last time he told this story, Malaya was still asleep and he woke up. And he realised it was quiet, and he said, I don't hear them. And in fact, according to Malaya's story, she didn't say, I don't hear them. She asked him if he heard them. And what he does next is verging on hysterical. He turns around and is once again trying to make Malaya look bad, saying, well, she said this less than 5 seconds after waking up. How would she know less than 5 seconds after waking up that there was a problem? Because they could have been in the cupboards or something, because kids go quiet when they're in the cupboards or doing something they're not supposed to be doing. This is problematic on so many levels. First of all, every other retelling, he's basically gone, I woke up and realised that I didn't hear anything. So he's established this in the past. My guess is that someone on a YouTube channel has commented on the fact that everything is immediate, and Daniel has gone, okay, well, I better reel this in, and since it's been said, I'll just blame it on Malaya. Thing is, he's already established here that he doesn't know if she woke him up or if they both woke up at the same time. So he actually doesn't know how long Malaya's been awake for. She could have been lying there for 5 minutes listening for sounds to see if the children were awake. But he's basically jumped on that straight away. He's gone into attack mode and attacked Malaya. That is always a huge red flag. And it's not just a red flag that he's gone into attack mode, it's a red flag that he's basically, once again, overselling it. All he's really achieving here is that he is destroying his and Malaya's narratives in one fell swoop.
Would you have noticed if she got out of bed?
No, I would have been sleeping. I didn't even know she called the kids in absent until I got the email on my phone.
Well, I mean, you woke up when Lily popped her head in, right? So you were.
Yes, I did, because there's a lock on the door, right? Yeah. And I heard like the lock rattle.
So do you think though that in the time that Lily popped her head in, and that woke you up, it alerted you a little bit, and the time that you fully woke up, do you think you would have been able to tell? Would you have the ability to tell whether or not Malaya got out of bed?
I don't know. Do you want to say that over again for me so I get I was just plugging in my phone, so I didn't.
Okay, so we have a few new additions to the narrative here. One is from Daniel directly, where he talks about there being a lock on the door and hearing the lock jiggling or something, which almost implies that Lily couldn't even get into their room. But then this turkey guy is trying to coach Daniel in terms of the narrative of Malaya taking the children down to the road and putting them in a car. And he asks him, would you have known if Malaya had gotten out of bed, given that you were drifting in and out of sleep. Daniel has to stall because this is throwing him a curveball. This is a new introduction to the narrative that he hasn't had time to think about. So he has to buy time for himself by essentially asking for clarification.
Hear you correctly.
No problem. So if you already have been woken up, Lily's popping in, so you've already woken up to a certain extent, maybe not fully awakened, but you've woken up to the point where you've acknowledged that the child has come in and out. Do you think in that moment, maybe not earlier, maybe not early in the morning, but from the moment that you were awoken, from the time that Lily popped her head in to the time that you were fully awake, do you think that Malaya could have gotten out of bed without you noticing?
I think she could have, but you have to remember too, the baby was laying on her arm as well.
Oh,
so like the baby was sleeping on top of her right arm.
So it's unlikely that she got out of bed.
Yeah, it's unlikely, but it is possible. I mean, anything's possible, but I think Meadow may have be woken up when she's actually moving.
Gotcha.
But it is possible, Daniel. I mean, anything's possible. This case is just an absolute circus, so anything's possible.
So he's actually opened a whole new can of worms here, because he hasn't had a chance to really process what he's been asked here. So he's just giving this weird contradictory answer. Well, I guess it's possible, but, Meadow was asleep on her arm, so then maybe it's not possible, but anything's possible because this case is a circus. I don't know how you go from the possibility of Malaya maybe getting out of bed with Meadow, and that makes this case a circus. But what it does establish quite clearly, and which Daniel doesn't realise that he's done, is that it would be rather problematic for Malaya to be in bed with Meadow and to get out of bed, somehow put Meadow somewhere, take Lily and Jack, take them down to the road, hand them over to someone, and then come back up and climb back into bed with Meadow without Daniel being aware of it. Because I'm pretty certain that had she either put Meadow with Daniel or put Meadow back in her crib, that Meadow would probably start fussing. And that is actually kind of implied in what Daniel is saying there in terms of her having Meadow on her arm. Because he's not saying like, oh, well, she was pinned down. She wasn't pinned down by her own child. What, in his brain, he was thinking, well, she wouldn't have been able to get up because she would have disturbed Meadow. So he's pretty much established what the issue is here. But he hasn't processed the fact that this turkey guy was actually trying to coach him and give him a way of introducing this notion of Malaya handing the children over to someone. But there's also a gaping hole in the narrative here also. We've heard from Malaya that the normal routine is that she gets up at around 6:15 and gets the children organised. Meadow has a breakfast, she gets Lily and Jack ready and takes them down to catch the bus. She's also established that Meadow sleeps in her crib. And she got up and got Meadow because she thought Lily and Jack were being a bit loud, so she got Meadow and took her to bed with her. Daniel hasn't acknowledged the fact that Meadow just appeared in their bed, that Malaya must have got up and brought Meadow to bed. So he's over-explaining in some spots and overselling, but then in other spots, he's leaving gaps.
And so she wakes up, you wake up. What's the first thing that you do?
First thing I do when I wake up is, Malaya's right beside me, and she says, you like hear the kids? And then I listen for a few seconds. I said, no, I don't hear them. So first thing I do is when I don't hear them, I get up and I, get dressed, and me and her make our way out to the kitchen. And this thing I still find odd to this day. I told investigators this is Malaya didn't look in Jack and Lily's room when we went up, when we walked to the kitchen, right?
Okay.
So I found that odd because we both walked up together up the hallway to the kitchen. And then I poked my head I looked into the living room, didn't see the kids. I ran back to the room, looked underneath their beds and stuff, didn't see them. So then we made our way outside, right? Malaya stood in the kitchen when I was running like a moron through the house looking for the kids. And we made our way outside. We got through the fence.
So for starters, he forgot what he'd already said a few minutes earlier. Because he claimed Malaya said, I don't hear them. And now he's saying that she asked him, do you hear the kids? And he's like, no, I don't. So even in this one interview, he's changed his narrative. And he's basically forgotten in a matter of minutes what it was that he just said. Now in this interview, he started getting overly creative and introducing new parts to the narrative. And he did that here. And he was doing it to try and throw more shade on Malaya. But he's just made himself look like a complete utter twat. Because what he says is, first of all, he says that the first thing he did was get dressed. Put a pin in that, we'll come back to that. And then him and her both went together to the kitchen. And this brings back memories of, those movies where people just suddenly become zombified and they're all just sort of all walking together. That's the sense I get from the way he's describing that. You would think that for the rest of their retelling, they're giving this sense of urgency, but now he's like, he gets dressed, and apparently Malaya just stands there and waits while he does that. And then they go to the kitchen together. And then he says, and, I noticed this and I mentioned it to the RCMP because, it's dodgy as. He didn't say dodgy as, I'm just throwing that in. But he's basically making this accusation like, Malaya didn't check their rooms. Well, neither did you, Daniel. You just said we both went straight to the kitchen. So apparently it didn't occur to either of you to check their rooms. But you blaming Malaya and saying, well, she didn't look, and that's suspicious. But you've just admitted you didn't look either. You said you went to the kitchen, then you stuck your head in the living room, and then you ran back and checked their bedroom. And then he claims that while he was doing that and he was running around like a moron through the house, that she was just standing there. Well, I guess probably because she could see that you were checking the rooms. It's not a huge living space. So if you walked into the kitchen together and you stuck your head in the living room and then turned around and headed for their bedroom, why would she need to follow you? Particularly given that presumably she's carrying Meadow. And of course, having established the fact that, when kids are silent, it usually means they're up to no good. Apparently it didn't occur to either of them to check in his children's bedroom. All they did was go straight to the kitchen. He poked his head in the living room. He dashed back and checked their bedroom. And then they went outside. Because it didn't occur to you they could be doing something in the bathroom. Maybe seeing if their toys would float. Or maybe, given that it sounds like they were treated as second-class citizens alongside Daniel's children, maybe they were in their room playing with toys that they wouldn't normally be allowed to play with. But apparently that was not a consideration. I actually think that Daniel's need to gaslight and discredit Malaya could be his downfall. Because it seems now that the moment you introduce Malaya into the mix, his first instinct is to go on the attack. And he doesn't think about what his original narrative is. Now, we've heard what Malaya said. We've heard most of Daniel's responses with regards to what happened around this time. Now I'm going to go to the documents and a few articles and a few written comments by Daniel. So I've got two excerpts. This one is from the Globe and Mail on the 4th of May. The next one is from CTV on the 6th of May. And these are ones where they have quoted Daniel. So, Globe and Mail. The children's stepfather, Daniel Martel, told the Globe and Mail that he and Malaya Brooks Murray, his partner, and the children's mother, and the couple's 16-month-old baby had been dozing in the bedroom on Friday morning as Lily came and went, while Jack could be heard playing in the next room. When the family awoke, the house was quiet. So, this is his first interview, aside from what he's told RCMP. We know that he did an interview with RCMP on the 2nd and the 3rd of May, and there were also subsequent ones after that. But this is the 4th of May. This is 2 days in. And he's saying Lily came and went and Jack could be heard in the next room, as in their bedroom. So his initial story here has got nothing to do with Jack being in the kitchen. And then we get the same standard line of the boots were right beside the door, and they proceeded, I'm guessing, to play outside, and then they must have got through the back fence and then they were gone. Apparently that part was easy enough for him and Malaya to both remember. Now, I found this one especially interesting, and this was actually the inspiration for doing this video in the first place. Martel says he and Malaya Brooks Murray asked Lily and Jack to quiet down on Friday morning to let the baby sleep. So again, it's a we thing. They were acting together, which is always a sign of a made-up narrative. But it's interesting that he's saying he asked, or the pair of them asked Lily and Jack to quiet down. And yes, I will acknowledge here that CTV had the spelling wrong for Lily. I think it took about a week for everyone to finally get the idea that Lily is spelt with 2 L's. And he goes on and he says, we were in the room laying down. So they weren't dozing in and out, they were just laying down. Me, Malaya and the baby. Lily poked her head in a couple of times. I seen that she's wearing a pink t-shirt. So I think that Daniel himself even has forgotten that in early days, what we believed was that the reason they knew what Lily was wearing was because she'd popped into the bedroom a few times and Jack had seen her. Therefore, Jack knew what she was wearing and was able to describe her clothes. We didn't see the documents until August, where it said that Malaya claimed that they were still wearing the same clothes that they wore to bed. The understanding that I had from the beginning was that they knew what Lily was wearing because she'd gone into the room and Daniel had seen what she was wearing. But now the narrative that we've been given is that Daniel didn't actually see what she was wearing because she only popped her head around the door. Now, I haven't got all those bits of audio, but we've definitely heard that said. But this is significant here that he is admitting that he allegedly saw what Lily was wearing. She was wearing a pink t-shirt. I'm just going to put a pin in that for a moment. He then goes on with the whole story of we usually don't like them to be too loud because they're going to wake up the baby. We want the baby to get as much sleep as possible. And then we're up to the 20 minutes. He estimates it took up to 20 minutes to notice the two children were gone. I don't know how him and Malaya came up with that magic number, but they seem to have agreed on this magic number, even though it doesn't fit with Malaya telling dispatch that the children were last seen at 8 o'clock, because that's like 2 hours, not 20 minutes. So then we get Daniel doing the various text messages between him and various content creators. Now, I can't remember who this was to, who this was with, but here he's doing the we both woke up. And here he's claiming, I think she said, do you hear the kids? It's a tough question because waking up from sleep, then your world changes on a dime. You forget small things like that. You forget who said, do you hear the kids? No, you don't forget things like that. Presumably, the person that questioned him here was actually questioning him in terms of how come Malaya said this and you said this. The story has changed so many times, and now he doesn't know what the right answer is here, so he's just going to be vague. And then, again, he's claiming that they both woke at the same time and proceeded outside. So in this retelling, they didn't even check the house. They just woke up and did the zombie thing once again and just walked outside. And at least here he's remembered that, oh yeah, Malaya was up first because she marked the kids as being absent. My question about that, though, is all their phones there were basically running off, Starlink or some sort of Wi-Fi? So she didn't actually need to get out of bed. Presumably her phone was by her bed. All she had to do was pick it up, mark the kids absent, put it down again. Attendance was done via an app. There was no reason whatsoever for her to actually physically get up to do that. So this is from conversations between him and that hidden in the fog lady. And first of all, he's now pushing the narrative of them going off with someone. And he's like, no Barbie shirt on, I can say that. Okay, well, you claim you saw what she was wearing. You said it was a pink shirt. Malaya apparently claimed it was a Barbie shirt. We'll come back to that. But to me, this sounds like another one of Daniel's stories. He is now trying to put shade on Malaya in terms of saying that Malaya lied about what the children were wearing. Like, how petty can you be? And then on the other side here, this is where he claims that Lily actually spoke to him and she either said, "Hi, Dad," or "Hello, Dad." I just want to remind you that he was interviewed by RCMP at least 4 times in the first week. And yet apparently this detail only comes out months later. No. If this actually happened, they would have questioned him about did Lily say anything. So for him to suddenly come up with it months later has a great big BS written all over it. So this is why Daniel is pushing the no Barbie top. Because according to Malaya, Lily was wearing a pink sweater, pink pyjamas, with white shapes and a Barbie top with pink socks. Whereas Daniel said in that interview with Globe and Mail, I think it was, or CTV, that she was wearing a pink top. So now he has to basically try and crap all over Malaya's account. But not only that, he wants to make Malaya look like a liar. What he doesn't realise is that if he is trying to undermine her story from that morning, he's undermining his own story and showing that they were both lying. Now, this is where it gets interesting when we look at the documents. So we have Malaya providing 4 statements to police. 2 were on May the 2nd, 1 on May 3rd, 1 on May 4th. So they were already onto them on May the 2nd by the sounds of it, probably because their statements weren't lining up. So we have a summary, which means that we may not see all the inconsistencies here, but we do see the inconsistencies from what they've said to the media. On the day Jack and Lily went missing, she heard them playing in the other room and was going in and out of sleep. Lily came in the room around 8:20 a.m. a couple of times. Daniel was sleeping the whole time and didn't really wake up. She didn't really hear them anymore around 9:40 a.m. So she got up and they couldn't find them, so they called 911. The police came and got statements. Everyone was frantically searching for them. Malaya did not think this would take days. So in Malaya's account, she was the one who was awake and saw Lily come in and out of the room a couple of times. Not Daniel. And then we get another account from Malaya. We get her talking about her alarm going off at 6. She used the school app and then went back to sleep. So it certainly sounds here like she didn't actually get up. It's like her alarm went off. She used the school app to mark the children absent, went back to sleep. And she says Daniel and Meadow were still sleeping. There was no other noise in the house. Then she heard the kids playing in their bedroom around 8 a.m. They woke Meadow up, so she took her into bed and turned the TV on for her, then faded in and out of sleep. So in this retelling, Lily didn't pop in and out of the room. The kids were giggling, laughing and talking to each other. The kids were in the room right next to theirs, so they were loud. So this version, Lily didn't pop her head in at all. Not only that, they were kind of loud, but they were in the room right next to her room. And then she goes back to the 9:40 a.m. She heard silence and told Daniel she didn't hear the kids. They got up together. This is the same story from both of them. They did the simultaneous zombie thing, both getting out of bed together and checking the living room and outside. Wouldn't it seem to be more natural behaviour for one of them to get up and check the house to see where the kids were? It sounds like a overreaction for them both to have to get up just because they hear silence. Daniel himself pointed out kids go quiet when they're up to things. And interestingly, she says they got up together, they checked in the living room and outside. Whereas Daniel in that account said that he stuck his head in the living room and then he went back and checked their bedroom. But here she hasn't thought to check their bedroom at all. They both have holes in their narratives, and coincidentally, their holes seem to correspond quite a lot. Okay, Daniel's account. He was in the bedroom with Malaya and Meadow, who were in bed with him. Lily came in a couple of times, but he did not check his phone to see the time. Again, there's no acknowledgement here from him that Meadow wouldn't normally sleep in their bed, and Malaya must have got up and brought her to bed. The television was on and it was daylight outside. Lily didn't say anything. She would just open the door and look in and then leave again. So this time she didn't say, "Hello, Dad." He didn't have to tell her to be quiet or shush. She would just open the door, look in, and leave again. She did that 2 or 3 times. They used to remind her not to rush into the room because they wanted to make sure Meadow got a good sleep. So this, again, contradicts all the stories. In this instance, we have Daniel getting up and then he didn't hear the kids. So it's not like he woke up and Malaya said, "Do you hear the kids?" He got up and he didn't hear them. But he thought it was only a few minutes since Lily last poked her head in the door. He went out and saw the back sliding door was closed. Their boots were gone. So he ran around the house looking for them, but they were not there. Malaya got up when he got up as well and was looking for the kids. He ran outside. So their boots were gone, but he still decided to run around the house first before checking outside to see if they were in the yard. Their stories just do not hold water. And they've both said the same thing in terms of their boots being gone. But hey, we ran around and checked all inside the house first. Another account from Daniel. This time, when Lily was sticking her head in their room, he could hear Jack in the kitchen in the background. He didn't see him, but he was usually loud and clumsy, so it was easy to hear him. So again, he's establishing this notion that only when Lily opened the door could he hear Jack being loud in the kitchen. Although he doesn't actually say that in this instance he was loud and clumsy, he just said he usually is, so it's easy to hear him. So he's not even giving a clear statement here. Other statements, he says he was rustling around in the kitchen. Here, he's saying, "Oh, well, it's easy to hear him because he's usually loud and clumsy." It is actually contradictory. And then he says he went out to look for the kids in the house and realised they weren't there. He went back into his bedroom to get dressed before going outside to look for them. Well, in an earlier statement that we've just read, although it was probably after this, in one that I just read earlier, he said that the first thing he did was get dressed. And then Malaya apparently just hovered there, doing nothing, and then they both went to the kitchen together. So remember that statement that Daniel made to CTV where Lily was wearing a pink top? Like, you would think that he is basically saying he's the last person to see Lily. And now we get this statement. Malaya asked investigators for the kids' belongings. In the process of gathering the kids' clothes, I found the clothes that Malaya gave to RCMP as a description in her statements. Further proof that the description is false, she gave, even though she put them to bed with their clothes on that night. Yes, but Daniel, you said you saw Lily in a pink top that morning. So if anyone's lying here, it's you for not correcting. Or maybe you're both lying. I'd be very interested to know if at one point in time Daniel happened to mention in one of his RCMP interviews, the same as what he mentioned to CTV, that he saw Lily wearing a pink top. Because if so, then making these accusations against Malaya is a load of BS. Because in actual fact, he's the one that should be saying what Lily was wearing, if he's the last person to have seen her. And he's given a description to the media of Lily wearing a pink top. Now, I had this sent to me, so I don't know who did the highlighting and the crossing out. I can't even remember now. But we have Daniel here claiming that he found the Barbie t-shirt, which goes with that previous comment about getting the clothes to give to Malaya and finding the things that she claimed that Lily was wearing. But again, this doesn't fit. If he was being truthful when he said to CTV that Lily was wearing a pink top when she shoved her head in the door, then you would expect that he would have given that same statement to the RCMP, in which case they would have asked for clarification from both Daniel and Malaya in terms of, hang on a moment, you've given us different accounts of what Lily was wearing. I'm pretty certain they also would have asked them to check what clothes were there and what clothes weren't there. So this is nothing more than him attempting to throw more shade on Malaya. The thing is, all he's doing is highlighting one of many inconsistencies in their stories. So you've seen through this, yes, some of the things he says are almost consistent, but not quite. At the same time, his story and Malaya's story are close enough to sound like they've been concocted together, but at the same time they contradict each other. Their stories contain exactly the same elements. You don't have, in their initial stories, you don't have different elements from one person and the other, which you would normally get if these were actual recounts, them remembering things. The fact that basically the elements are the same, even though they contradict each other, that shows that this is all fabricated. You know, for example, it wasn't until a later interview that Malaya went, oh yeah, I got up and I did the app to mark them absent. You can see in the record of her first interviews that it was just the same standard story that both her and Daniel were selling. Yeah, you know, the kids were just playing in the room next door or playing in the kitchen. Malaya woke up and saw Lily. Oh, but no, Daniel woke up and saw Lily. And then they both woke up simultaneously. They simultaneously went out to the kitchen. All those things. They both use we statements at times when they just don't fit. And they both over-explain. You only get Daniel introducing this variation to the narrative when he's trying to throw shade on Malaya over the last month or so. In the early days, their narratives pretty much matched. They contradicted, but they matched. They had the same elements included. It's just that they forgot how they were supposed to be saying it and they contradicted each other. There's far too many red flags here for these to be genuine statements. So we need to keep this in mind when Daniel is pushing this narrative now about Malaya organising for someone to take their children. Because we need to remember that in those first few days, Daniel and Malaya were selling the exact same narrative. In the early days, Daniel and Malaya apparently worked as one single entity. it makes it an impossibility for this BS story that Daniel's now trying to push. Anyway, I had planned this as only being a short video, and it's certainly not that. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm going to be very interested to hear your thoughts on this. So thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit that like button. That gets this out there into the algorithm, gets it seen by more people. And please leave a comment below. So thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.